Thank you, Emily. And thank you, kids. Kids have inspired me, not expired me, but inspired me greatly what they're singing. That was amazing. Well, it has been said that we as humans are creatures of what? Creatures of habit. That's where I was leading towards. We are creatures of habit. Last time when we looked into this, I quoted a PhD professor who said that 90% of everything we buy in the store is determined by our habits and our emotions. It's not determined by our rationale. It's not determined by our reason. It's determined by what we're used to and what we feel like. So I thought about, so what about habits? Because not just shopping, but everything we do in life, 50% of that, 40 to 50%, depending on the research you read, it's habits. It's what you're used to. So what did you have for a breakfast?
Cereal.
So some people are saying cereal. Congratulations, that's a habit. Not everybody has that habit. Other people, for example, have coffee for breakfast. A cup of coffee. Some people take a cup of coffee with a cigarette. That's their habit. Again, that's something that we're used to. How often we eat, what we eat, how much we eat, those are all habits. Now, the question is, can we overcome habits? Do habits rule us, or do we rule our habits? That's the question. The truth of the matter is, we have the habits, and most of our habits are, we never thought about developing this specific habit. It just so happened. So, for example, if you have a habit of having cereal in the morning for breakfast, chances are that was the habit in your parents' home as you were growing up, and so you transferred that habit into your own house. And the truth about habits, they are really hard to break if you have bad habits. And it's really hard to start a good habit, especially if you have a bad habit. So, what about you guys? Do you have any habits in your life that you're proud of? And do you have some habits in your life that you're not so proud of and you would like to change that in your life? So I asked the kids, do you have any bad habits and any good habits in your life? And here are the responses that I got from the kids. So one boy said, I have a habit of sitting on my phone for way too long. Can any of the adults relate to that? You've seen kids being on their phones for longer than they should. Well, the boy acknowledges that that's the habit that I have, and it's not the best habit. Another guy said, I do not really listen to my parents, and that's a bad habit that I have. Another boy said, I like to play games, and that has become a habit, and I'm trying to deal with it. Now, this one was a girl, and she said, I like to spend money. I like to spend money. That has become my habit. And then one girl said, I do not have any bad habits. Wouldn't that be amazing, right? Well, she was 5 years old. Some of you are like, no way. She was 5 years old. I don't know if she really understood the question or not. And so what are the good habits? Well, again, I asked the kids and they told me, well, I have a habit of helping mom. Is that a good habit or a bad habit? That's a good habit. Or I have a habit of doing homework. That's a good habit. And another said, I would like to have a habit to spend more time in developing myself, and I would like to be more patient. Can we all use some of that? Yes, as a father of 3 kids, I can tell you that I could use a bit more of patience. So the real question is, how can we change the habit? Is it possible to change the habit? Because some people are saying, hey, look, it's just my habit. It's just my nature. And there's nothing I can do about it. Well, that's something that we're going to talk about today. First of all, we need to understand and realize that there is no habit that cannot be changed. There isn't a habit that cannot be changed. How do we know that? Well, 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13, we read, no temptation has overtaken you except such as is common to men. But who is faithful? God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you're able. But with the temptation will also make the way of escape that you may be able to bear it. So it doesn't matter how bad the habit is in our lives. Is God stronger than our habits? Yes or no? God is definitely stronger than our habits. So when we talk about habit change, we need to understand one thing. God is stronger than any habit, and if we ask Him for help, He will help us. Okay? Amen. Because here's the deal. Some people are saying, look, it's just a habit and there's nothing I can do. And guess what? Can they overcome a bad habit with that attitude? If that's the attitude, you're not going to overcome it. So first thing we need to notice is that there is no habit that cannot be changed. Now, you might say it's easy to build habits when you're a kid in your parents' house, when you don't have, your own, you don't make your own decisions, you don't have your own responsibilities. But how about an adult? Can those formed habits be changed in the life of an adult? Yes or no? Is there an example of that? Is there, I would call it like a habit factory. There's this place, when you get there, they change your life drastically. They mold you into this new shape. It's a habit factory, I would call it. It's called Marine Boot Camp. Doesn't have to be necessarily Marine, but any boot camp in the military or army, guess what they do? They start new habits in you. So here's what I found on the Marine Boot Camp website. It's Marine Boot Camp, mphq.com, and here's what they say. The primary goal of phase 1 is to distance you from your physical and psychological habits as a civilian. So we understand that you come here with the habits. Guess what? Our job number 1 is to make sure you forget about all of your habits, and we're going to do something. What are we going to do? Your life will become military routines, doing basic tasks by the numbers, and you won't be able to refer to yourself by name. Recruits are taught everything from ground up, from how to brush their teeth to how to stand straight and even how to eat. Can you believe that? Those guys are 18, 20-something years old, and they're being taught how to dress, how to eat, how to brush your teeth, how to walk, how to stand. This is the place where new habits are formed. And those people that realize that, when you realize that, hey, look, it doesn't matter where I am in life, it doesn't matter what my past habits were or present habits are, I can change it. And by changing our habits, we can change our life. And there is nothing impossible in that regard. So here's what one of the majors said. Understanding habits is the most important thing that I've learned in the Army. It changed everything in my perception of the world. Do you want to fall asleep quickly and wake up in a good mood? Well, pay attention to your night habits and what you automatically do when you get up. Do you want to make running easy? Make it a habit. I teach my children this business every day. He says, this is what I figured out. If I can turn something into a habit, I can do it easily. Here's the deal about habits. You guys remember when you first time got behind the steering wheel of the car? You guys remember when that was? For some of us, it was longer, distant past than for others. But the first time you get behind that steering wheel, it is extremely complicated. Because how do you start the car? You have to put the key into the ignition. Where is the ignition? How far do you turn? You turn and then you hold and then you have to release. And then those of you that learn how to drive a stick shift, it's a nightmare for somebody who's doing it for the very first time, because you have to press the clutch. Which one's the clutch? Where is it? You have to look down and you have to find it. And you have to put it in gear, first gear, second gear, third gear. And then you have to, if you are backing up from the garage, you have to look in the mirrors and you're releasing the clutch and you're raving up your RPM, and you have to watch the RPM in the mirrors. And then somebody's asking you questions. It's a nightmare, right? It is extremely difficult. But once that becomes your habit, your second nature, you're not even thinking about it. And that's what the scientists are telling us, that once we repeat something enough times and it becomes our habit, it's another part of our brain is now responsible for it. We don't have to go through these complicated algorithms. We have figured things out and we do it automatically. We don't have to put all this effort to do this. So he says, you want to run? Well, make it a habit, and it will be easier for you to do it. So thing number one that we have to remember, if we want to change any bad habit, we need to remember, first thing is, any habit is changeable. There is no habit that cannot be changed. The second thing we have to remember is we need to understand how habit works. When you start something new, you have decided, give me an example of a good habit that you're going to start doing starting tomorrow. I was like, I don't know, I'm not changing anything. I'm going to go to the gym tomorrow, before work, let's say. And you have to be at work, let's say, at 8. And so that means you got to be in that gym by 6 so that you can be home by 7 something, take a shower, get changed and eat your breakfast and go to work. So guess what? You wake up, that alarm goes off in the morning, 6 a.m. Guess what you're feeling like? You're not feeling like going to that gym, are you? You're like, no, I'm not going to that gym. I would rather sleep till 7 than go to the gym. But here's the thing. Here's how habit works. It's very difficult at the beginning. Kind of like with that driving illustration. The first time is the hardest. The second time you do it, it's a little bit easy. It's still hard, but it's a little bit easier. But then if you get into it and you do it again and again and again and again, over time, it becomes your second nature. You wake up on your own without that alarm. You cannot not go to the gym. You're like, no, I don't believe you. I'm looking at your faces. Like, no, that's not true. Well, it is true. And that's how habits work. When something becomes our habit, are you forcing yourself to eat cereal in the morning? Was it cereal or oatmeal? You're not forcing yourself. Now, for somebody who's used to just drinking coffee in the morning and not have anything else for breakfast, and you tell him, okay, we got to change things. You need to have cereal in the morning. Guess what? For them, that's going to be a torture, right? But here's the deal. We need to understand how habits work. And this is what happens. People look at somebody who runs or goes to the gym or eats cereal or has any other good habit, and they're like, yeah, I'm going to try that. And they try that cereal in the morning, and they're not used to it, and they're like, this is the most disgusting thing I've ever tried. I just can't do that to myself. I am not that kind of a person. That's not for me. The reason they come to that conclusion is because they don't understand how habits work. When you do something for the first time, it's hard. It's not for you. But if you keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it, it's going to get easier and easier and easier over time. So the third thing that we want to look at is we need to start small. So when we talk about habit change, chances are we have more than one good habit that we need to acquire or more than one bad habit that we need to get rid of. Well, if we try to do everything at once, it's not going to work. But if we try a little bit and we're faithful in a little, Jesus says in Gospel of Luke, Luke chapter 16, verse 10, he who is faithful in what is least is faithful also in what? In much. And he who is unjust in what is least unjust also in much. The third principle of habit change is if we want to change a habit in our life, we should start with little. Start with little and then make sure that becomes your routine, that becomes your habit, that becomes your second nature. And again, that's something they do in the military. On May 17th, 2014, Admiral William McRaven addressed graduates from Texas University or University of Texas at Austin at their graduation. He was inspired Admiral McCraven, he was inspired by their slogan, the university's slogan. And the slogan is, what starts here changes the world. And so he thought about his own life because he was one of the graduates of that university. And then he thought about his personal experience in Marine boot camp and some of the lessons that he learned. And so this speech became so viral that it got like 10 million views on YouTube in hardly any time. And so after that, he published this book, and the book was called Make Your Bed, because that was the first principle that he wanted to teach those students that would change the world. You know, the task is so great. We want to change the whole world. But here's what he said. Every morning during basic SEAL training, my instructors, who were Vietnam veterans at the time, came to my room in the barracks, and the first thing they checked was your bed. So here he is, training to be a SEAL, training to be this tough, warrior, and the first thing that they are checking is what? Were you able to make your bed? And we're starting small, right? We're starting with something very small. If done correctly, corners will be square, the bedspread will be taut, and the pillow will be centered under the headboard. And the extra blanket will be neatly folded at the foot of the hanger. Now, that was a simple task, and it was a very frustrating task. Because here are these guys, they want to be mighty tough warriors. They came to become Navy SEALs. They want to be, these tough fighters. And what are they being taught? They're being taught, this is how you make your bed. And this is how you do it, and we will check that every morning to make sure you learn that. Now, if you make your bed every morning, he said at a time I couldn't understand what's the point. Why would somebody, train us so hard on such a little thing? But then he says, with years I understood the wisdom of this. He says, if you make your bed every morning, you have completed the first task of the day. This will give you little pride and encourage you to complete one more task, and then another, and then another. By the end of the day, this one completed task will turn into many completed tasks. Making your bed will also prove that little things matter in life. And if you can't do little things right, you can never do big things right. And he says, if you had a miserable day, you will return home to a tucked in bed will reassure you that tomorrow will be better. He says, then you come back home and you see that thing's done right. And even though my day was a mess, it's not going to be like that forever. And things are going to change in my life. The fourth principle for the habit change is we want to plan ahead. So if you want to go to the gym, you know ahead of time you're not going to want to wake up in the morning. You know that's not going to be your natural desire. You might feel like it at night, but the first thing in the morning when you wake up, you don't feel like it. So what are we going to do? Well, we need to plan ahead. We want to set an alarm. We want to get our shoes ready, get our clothes ready. We want to make sure that we do what we have planned. Here's what happened in the life of Daniel when he knew ahead of time that the trouble awaits him. And here's what he did. Daniel chapter 1, verse 8. But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's delicacies, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the chief of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. When do you think Daniel made the request? When he was at the table and everybody was ready to eat? Or do you think he kind of went ahead of time and talked to the chief of the eunuch beforehand? The text doesn't really specify, but it gives me at least this feeling that he has planned ahead. It leaves this impression on me that he came and he talked and he discussed these things before he would get into this awkward situation where he wouldn't eat anything from that table. So whenever we want to fight or, the bad habit or develop a new habit, we need to understand that it's going to be tough at that point of when we make the decision. But if we make a decision ahead of time and we plan ahead, it will make it easier. So for example, as of September 29, 2020, Starbucks had 349,000 employees, 32,000 cafeterias in 83 countries. Why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because Starbucks spent $72 million on advertisement in 2019, and then they spent $77 million on advertisement a year prior to that. So they're spending a lot of money on advertisement so that people would go to Starbucks, right? But then something like this happens when an angry Starbucks manager blows up at the customer in New York. And somebody was just standing there with their phone and they videotaped, or they took a video of this whole conversation and they put it on YouTube. And that video got 5,800,000, views. And that video was on national news, on different channels, and guess what it does to those $77 million that we have spent on propagating and advertising Starbucks? Guess what this one instance does? All of those 77 millions that were spent are just, it's in the trash, and now we need to spend a whole lot more. So what do you do? If you're the manager of the whole Starbucks, if you're the CEO, what do you do? Let's fire that lady, right? That angry manager. Yeah, we could do that. Would that fix the problem? We still have 348,999 workers that can snap back to the customer, say something rude that would be recorded on the phone, put on the internet. It's not going to fix the problem. Right? How do you fix the problem? So Starbucks went into creating new habits in the life of their workers. The difficulty is that most of those workers and employees, they are like college-age people with Starbucks being their first job. They're not, highly responsible, and they can say stuff that you wouldn't appreciate them saying. So what do? So they would go through a boot camp, so to speak. They would go through the training. And more specifically, you would be asked by your manager, so if an angry customer walks in, how are you going to respond? Here's the sheet of paper. You need to write things down. And now we're going to practice it until it becomes your habit that when somebody